this is simply about one thing, is making your game better and making the player experience better. So if AI serves you in doing that and you're not embracing it and others are, we're going to lose.
Welcome to Game Changers, where we dive into the trends and innovations and leaders shaping the future of gaming. I'm Jason Chapman, managing partner of Convoy, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by my friend Alexis Bonte, who is the newly appointed CEO of Stillfront Group. Alexis has a fascinating background as an entrepreneur, investor, and gaming executive, and today we're going to discuss the future of gaming, Stillfront's approach to publishing, and where the industry is headed next. Thanks for joining us, Alexis.
Thank you, Jason. Super happy to be here, and always good to chat with you. So I'm going to enjoy this.
Alexis, all right, let's start with an easy one. Start with your journey. How did you get into gaming? And then how on earth are you now the CEO of Stillfront? So give us the story that led us to this moment.
Yeah, I know. I agree. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. Now, basically, I started as an entrepreneur when I was 21 because nobody would give me a job. With some friends, we did a company called lastminute.com, which was kind of the Expedia of Europe. It was one of the first unicorns. It did an IPO. We did, lots of things. I did every kind of job there. I was marketing and sales director, and I was a managing director for part of it. I set up the commercial team, did lots of things. And we sold it in 2005 to Travelocity, to Sabre. And it was a $1.1 billion exit at the time. So, which in Europe was a really big deal back in the day, 2005. And then I could pretty much choose whatever I wanted to do next. And I've always been crazy about video games since I'm a kid. I've had, Spectrum 48K, Amiga 500, obviously the Nintendo 8-bits, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Mega Drive. I even had the CD32, if you ever heard of that one. So it was really a big gamer. And I started playing games again after the exit, and I realized that I had to buy a new computer just to play some like basic strategy games. You had all these piracy codes where if you lose your box, you couldn't play the game. So I actually had to get a pirate version of the game I bought so I could play it. It was just nowhere. And I thought, wow, the kind of games I like, strategy games, could perfectly be online. And so that's how I started building eRepublik Labs. I tried to do civilization on the internet with real people. That was the premise for eRepublik.com. Co-designed the game, had no idea what I was doing. Got 6 developers to help me do that. And we launched the game in 2009, I think. And the way I launched it's very interesting because Supercell just did the same thing for Moco. The way I launched the game, because Gmail has launched Gmail by just, giving 5, inviting a few people, and then the people they invited had 5 invites and so forth. So it was kind of like the nightclub thing. It was the cool thing to get an invite. So I did for Republic, I knew at the time it was bloggers. I knew a few bloggers. I gave them then I gave them 5 invites. And so we scaled that game to about 10 million people in a few months with almost no marketing budget. And that's basically how I got into games. I obviously pivoted to mobile games when that became a thing, specializing for strategy games. And until Republic became a nice, profitable business, but not like a $1 billion business. There was a few things missing. So I decided to start a sales process in 2016 and sold it to Stillfront in 2017. So that's kind of the story of how I got into games.
And let's try games. Never was professionally trained to be in games. Decided just to launch a studio. And it led to you selling to Stillfront, where you are today. Maybe just let's dive into the launching of eRepublik a little bit. So who'd you do that with? Did you know the people that came alongside you? Did you have any kind of gaming veterans, or was it really just kind of a band of people that were high performers and got together and loved games?
I think it would be. There's no way it would succeed today with how competitive the market is. At the time, nobody was doing browser free-to-play games. There was a few studios in Germany, a few people in South Korea, and that was it. So I just found some developers that I met through conferences and all that. One of them shared a common passion for Civilization, which was kind of the game I love. His name was Jorgen Maurer. He's actually the founder of Green Horse Games now that he sold to Miniclip. And we just kind of joined forces, started working on the game together, co-designing it, finding some developers to do it, and launched it. That it was really that simple.
I've logged thousands of hours in Civ 2 and Civ 3. I played a little bit of Civ, the original Civ, but not as much. And you're reminding me how much I loved that game. I love RTS games myself, which I think we've talked about before. You said something interesting, that this would never succeed today. If you were going to launch a studio today, how much harder do you think it is, maybe on a percentage basis, right? Is it 1,000 times harder? Is it 10 times harder to pull off what eRepublik pulled off? How much harder is it today to be successful with a new studio in games?
I mean, first of all, being completely realistic, eRepublik was moderately successful. It's joining forces with Stillfront and then doing their rollout and acquiring lots of other studios and all that became a massive success. But eRepublik by itself was not a massive success. And one of the reasons I think it wasn't a massive success is we lacked some of the core skills of game making, live operations that we now have. We didn't really know how to design things properly. We had the famous problem of, you succeed with one game and then you don't succeed in the next game and the game after that and the game after that. It took us something like, I think probably 7 or 8 failed games before you got our next successful game. So it was really, really hard. And we were able to still survive because with very low costs, we had a bit of time. There wasn't that much competition. So I could raise money in spite of the fact that we weren't doing particularly well, all that sort of things. Now I think it's 1,000 times harder. If you're doing mobile free to play, then if you're doing indie, PC, I mean, all those Steam, there's more games coming out of Steam now per year than games coming on mobile. Maybe it's a different thing. But my feeling is like what you need to succeed in mobile games in terms of development speed, quality of live operations, scaling your game with performance marketing and all that, it's just massive. And Ilka makes a very good point. He's saying, well, there's not enough innovation in mobile. That's why a lot of the mobile games companies are struggling. I think he's right, but if you just have innovation, you don't succeed either. So you actually need the whole range to succeed. So it's really, really, really difficult.
And you're highlighting how hard it is to launch a new studio in mobile right today, because the lack of innovation, we're kind of, what has been new really truly in the last 5 to 10 years for mobile. I then want to press into that. If you had to start a studio today, would you start it in mobile? Would you start it in console? Would you start it for PC? Would you pick a new platform? Considering, I think there's kind of 2 things to consider there. One is the competition set, but then also you're having to consider distribution, and obviously where are the players. If I forced you tomorrow to start a new studio, what lane would you choose and why?
So strangely enough, I would still do mobile free to play. The reason I would still do mobile free to play is, let's start with why I wouldn't do other things. So the reason I wouldn't do like PC, Steam, or AAA or anything like that is, on one hand, the PC, Steam, indie, although that's the sort of games I love playing, the Latro and all that. That's really the adventure of 2 or 3 people, 4 people, maybe just one person that do something very special, and they just hit the jackpot through innovation and quality. And you get very few of those that really kind of make a difference. And none of those are the type of outcomes that I'm trying to get, because what I want to do is I want to build $1 billion companies, right? And so that's very difficult to do there. If you're doing a AAA game, then that's even harder, and you're waiting for 4 or 5 years, 3 years to get to success. We're seeing, how a lot of the investments that have been done in kind of former Riot teams and all that, now, they need to show what they've got after 3 or 4 years, and we're seeing that's becoming quite difficult. So that's another part I wouldn't do, and also I don't have the experience. VR is a bit, although I've been kind of, I've been in VR since the first Oculus. I actually have the first Oculus here in my office. I do a bit of VR from time to time. I haven't been a massive believer, although there are a few companies now that make decent revenues and all that on VR, but I still don't think that's necessarily the $1 billion company right away. Whereas on mobile, if you know the right people, if you can build the right team together, if you have the ability to raise sufficient funds and you can build all of that, I still think, especially with AI now, that kind of really augments very, very good people, very strong teams, that it's one of those very, very few industries in the world where you have the right 15 people and you have enough resources and funds and you know how to use AI in a proper way. With just a few $1 million, you can build a $1 billion game. And you can do that in 2 years. It's the only industry that I know and understand where you can still do that. It's very hard, but it is still possible.
So how many studios are under the Stillfront group now, and how many of them are using artificial intelligence, and let's call it not like a auxiliary way, but like a core way to their development process?
Yeah. So we've acquired over the years a total of 21 game studios. We've merged a few of them, for efficiency reasons. So really right now we're operating really 16 studios. I would say that of those studios, every single one of them is using AI in a, as you say, auxiliary way. So cost savings in localization, production of performance marketing assets. You go from trying 30 things a month to trying 300 things a month or even more. So that's being done as well. All the engineers, using either Copilot or Claude to kind of augment productivity. So all of that, I would say every single studio is using that. Most of the resistance that some artists had maybe last year where, this is maybe going to replace my job or whatever, we've done a lot of work into explaining to them, no, this is going to augment your job and make your job more interesting, and you're going to be able to do a lot more things. So all of that is working and it's there, but that's not, in my opinion, that's only scratching the surface of what you can do with AI. Now we're very, very far from one VC that will name told me, which is a gaming investment VC, saying, I'm no longer investing in any games company. Okay, I'm only investing in AI companies, and the only thing I'm interested is prompt to game. I think we're quite far from prompt to game, and we've seen some of the initial results. That's not really good. On the other hand, what I'm seeing is, and we have 1, 2, 4 studios which are really looking at how can I make the experience of the player a lot more interesting by using AI. And that's either, and again, the simple thing is segmentation, personalized experience. But the really cool thing is just making the gameplay better. And one example of that is we have a company, Joe Walker. They have a card game. They're very popular card games in the MENA region. And one of the card games is a bit like Bridge, where you play with a partner and with a real life partner against someone else who's playing with a real life partner. And we were struggling to monetize the game very well because people were cheating. So they were calling, or they're the partner on Discord, and they were kind of telling them what they had. So it made the game easier. So they got all these complaints about people cheating, and it was limiting the potential of the game. So what they did is they said, okay, we're going to have another game mode where you, Jason, you're playing with a partner, which is an AI. And I, Alexis, I'm playing with a partner, which is also an AI. And they can also say what kind of style of play I want that AI, that partner to have. And then you and I know that we can cheat, and the monetization of that game went up through the roof. So that's an example of how to use it.
When you think about kind of personalized play, right? This is often one of the most cited, I think, for games. Is one of the benefits is how could you tailor a gaming experience better that's designed for Jason, both on a monetization perspective for the developer, but also for a joy perspective for the player. What do you think we lose, though, in the common thread of experience? So in the sense of, if I was playing the Halo 2 campaign and you were playing the Halo 2 campaign, we go through the same mission. There's a cultural moment of we've achieved and conquered this level together. I can talk to you just like, when we go to the movies afterwards, what does everyone do? They turn to each other and they start talking about the movie, the experience that was the common experience together. What do you think we're going to lose if everyone is playing in a similar sandbox, but having completely different experiences where there is no common thread? Have you all thought about that as a potential issue for, let's call it, the personalization of games for players versus kind of the common thread of cultural moments that are created together?
So I think, first of all, a lot of those moments that you're describing, they do happen more on PC and console, which is what I call rendezvous gaming. So I can take a rendezvous, a meeting with you, Jason, to let's play on Saturday at 6 o'clock, and do an hour or 2 hours of this game together, and then you get those experiences. Let's play together. I'll be online, which is one of our games, and let's do that dungeon and do it together. And I'll be the healer, and you'll be the knight in shining armor, right? So that's pretty magical.
I like where you're going. I like where you're going.
And I think these moments, you don't want to lose them, but you do actually want to increase the ability to have those moments. And sometimes, well, you and I, Jason, we showed up, but Marjorie didn't show up, and we can't do the dungeon, and so we're screwed. Well, maybe we could, instead of having Marjorie, we could have the AI that comes with us, and this kind of that is the ranger, and he's allowing us to do that dungeon that we wanted together. And at that moment, maybe we didn't share it with Marjorie, but you and I had that moment. So I think that's how I think about how you can still have that. On mobile, it's a bit different because it's not rendezvous gaming. So very often when you're having multiplayer experiences, you're having multiplayer experiences with people you don't know anyway, right? Then you can make friendships and try and, play Brawl Stars at the same time. It's a bit different. So there, I think you can move the digit towards having more AI companions higher than what you would do on PC and console.
Got it. It's interesting you're highlighting kind of the prevalence of, let's call it, more enhanced, we're going to use the word bots, which is what they've been before, but now it's kind of a companion, right? Where that character is more intelligent, actually plays more, mimics what an experience of like a fellow human would be playing. I play Call of Duty Mobile pretty avidly. I've been legendary the last since season 1, and so I'm working my way up now. They just started a new season, but it's very clear when you join the lobby, and they've thrown in a few bots to fill it out. And I have a couple of members on my team who heckle me on this, being like, it's very easy to be legendary against a bunch of dumb bots in a mobile server. But I tell you, I would be very excited about that, right? Where it's indistinguishable. I think today it's very clear when you hit a AI companion or an AI bot versus a player in a multiplayer setting in particular.
I would still distinguish it. Where I stop where kind of my it's like the ethical side of what I want to do, right? I wouldn't want you to play with an AI companion, or you and I to play against someone else, and not to know that that's an AI companion. I think that's not great. And there's some games where your AI companions, you get attached to them. They're amazing. They've got if you think of a Baldur's Gate experience, I've been playing, the latest Baldur's Gate, and you really get attached to the characters that you're playing with, and there's a storytelling, there's a desire around that. So I think there's real value in building an AI companion that is AI companion, but there's just a different angle to the joy that you extract from playing with that character or against someone else that has that character in their team. So there's something that I think I want to keep that distinction, no matter how human-like, the AI companion might behave.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think, it's interesting kind of thinking through the developers as they're navigating this, right? I think kind of going back to how each of your developers are handling this. I typically, with new technologies that come into the realm of whatever you're in, if for us it's games, expectations could not be higher. You cited earlier, prompt to play, full-fledged AAA game that, I jump into tomorrow that was created 30 seconds ago. I agree with you. I think we're a ways away from that. Where do you think most of your developers are and the studios are with acceptance of the technology? So you said, very natural, just like with the movie writers in LA who were getting challenged by the script prompts, a lot of friction. Everyone was very frustrated by that. And then there sort of is a path forward of, all right, maybe we can use this as an augmentation to produce faster and more high quality work. Where do you think, just speaking from the Stillfront perspective and maybe also from the larger industry perspective, you think the reception is from the creators today for the technology?
So to be honest, it will depend on the studios. We have different studios. We have studios that are based in the US, studios that are based in Germany, others in India. But I think we've advanced quite a lot. I'll give you an example of something that happened not when I stepped up as permanent CEO, but when I stepped up as interim CEO. One of the things that I started doing town halls, virtual town halls, where I just go over what's happening in the company with everyone. And usually about half the company joins. So that's 700, 800 people. And I don't like doing big presentations. I like to talk, but still like a few things. And I had, I think, 3 or 4 slides just to illustrate a few points I had. And the images were done, all of them were done with AI. And it's like, anyone can ask me any question they want. And one of the questions was like, hey, Alexis, with all the amazing artists that we have in the company, like, how come you're using AI images in your presentation? It's like, we feel bad about this.
How dare you, how dare you use the technology? Yeah.
Exactly. And my answer was, well, I think your time is much better used making our games better and more beautiful and more interesting for our players than, spending making, the CEO slides look slightly better. So for that AI makes sense, right? And I think it's a dialogue that you need to have, and just being very pragmatic and very honest, and just remind everybody that this is simply about one thing: is making your game better and making the player experience better. So if AI serves you in doing that, and you're not embracing it, and others are, we're going to lose.
I think this is highlighting, either you can take it 2 ways. One is you can increase output, right? So with the new technology, either you increase output, or you replace output and allow that person to theoretically focus elsewhere on the more difficult, hard problems, right? And this is something that, I've talked a lot about with people in the industry where, I think the people that should never be afraid are the excellent producers, right? The people that are truly the creative geniuses who, inspire us to jump in and play these games. The people I obviously think that are more threatened are probably people that are just kind of laying brick. I told you to lay brick this direction, lay that brick and walk away. And there's no creative, or I'd say kind of human genius involved. That is where I would probably push and say, I think that cohort of people probably should feel more threatened with any kind of technological jump, not just AI. And I think that's where a lot of the friction kind of comes from.
Yeah, no, that's probably right. Yeah.
All right. So talk me through really quick. So you became the interim. Well, first you became the COO, if I'm not mistaken, of the Stillfront group, and then eventually this interim CEO, and then the full-time CEO. Can you talk us through that story? When did you step away from being just focused on eRepublik to more of the group perspective? And, what made you want to make that jump, and then maybe walk through the next kind of steps in that transition process?
When Stillfront acquired eRepublik Labs, Stillfront was actually a very small organization. It was, it was already in the public market on the Swedish NASDAQ. But I think the combined revenues, I could be wrong, but it must have been something like 55, 60 million, and the combined profit 15 million, 10 or 15 million, something like that. So it was still relatively small, and it must have been not a lot more than 100 people at the time. And just like every acquisition we've made until then, I had an earnout with the team, and my plan initially was to serve my earnout. I actually had negotiated 20% Google time during my earnouts. I was doing VC with a VC firm in Europe, kind of trying to learn and thinking about what the next thing would be. But then I realized that I kind of knew a lot of the studios that would make sense to have being part of the Stillfront adventure. So I got more and more involved with growing Stillfront up to a point that the board asked me if I wanted to step up as the COO of the group within a year and a half joining. which I did because I saw the opportunity of building a big group. And so that's, together with the team there, that's how we kind of went into hyperspeed. Got a lot of things right at the beginning. We got a few things wrong, especially during COVID times. But we then, grew the group to where it is today, which is, close to $700 million in revenues, 200 million in EBITDA, 100 million cash flow, 1,300 people. So that we did that really, really quickly. We basically did that mostly from 2018 to 2022. So 4 years.
And obviously, you are the first CEO after the founder, who's the CEO. What's that transition been like for Stillfront? And obviously, you're a founder yourself. You can probably empathize with that transition more than the average, let's call it executive who hasn't founded and sold their own company. Maybe just walk us through what that transition's been like for the company and for you stepping into kind of the new seat.
Yeah. So Jorgen is the founder of Stillfront, and we have very different styles and approaches. Jorgen is an incredible strategic mind in terms of putting things together, finance, explaining things to analysts and all that. He's an entrepreneur as well, but more oriented towards the financial side of things. I'm more of a product and people person, so a bit of a different approach. Jorgen's style of leadership was perfect when the games industry was growing very quickly. The company was still the blue ocean in many, many areas, and it was really about really quickly accumulating the right types of studios and then the right moves. He did really, really well. Now that we're in a time where things are a lot more competitive and you need to make sure that you're working on the right games with the right people, putting the resources in the right places and really, really focusing. And M&A is still an option, but not the key priority. It was a natural transition for someone that's kind of also has that founder DNA, but is more oriented towards product and spends less of his time on the analysts and being a public company, although you always have to do that when you're a public company, was just a very natural transition. Having been the CEO of the company for a while, I also know very well, what needs to be improved, what needs to be changed, where we needed to be faster, what wasn't working and needed to be cut, where we needed to invest. So it's been I would say, quite a successful transition that the team has received very, very well. It also gives a lot of reassurance to the team, although I've been taking some pretty harsh decisions. It gives reassurance to the team that the person that's making the decisions now is someone that knows what works and what doesn't work. So so it's been quite good.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective that you have, given that you've been, let's call it, to use a more of a military analogy, you've been like a captain or a lieutenant, kind of running your own brigade underneath the larger organization. Then you've also sat in that seat, kind of watching all the different nodes underneath you and battalions. And now you're in that seat. And so you really have kind of sat in every seat. I think that's probably relevant to run this org, which is super unique.
Yeah. And if you add to that, the angel investor experience, the VC experience, and the M&A kind of, experience, I really have a 360 view of all the different stages, which is pretty interesting, which gives me a lot of humility and respect about what I have to do today, because it's not easy.
And when you're sitting there, right, obviously one of the things that I find fascinating, that I actually really like about the European markets in comparison to a lot of, the ways that we do things here in the US, I think the threshold of a company going public in Europe does not have to be gargantuan, and I think that forces and requires probably better financial discipline, reporting, accountability. And so I think there's a lot of things that are really attractive about that market. But obviously on the flip side, that can be tough if you're having to move quick and be a little bit more nimble as a, let's quote unquote, a startup or a smaller player. How do you think about the pros of being public versus the cons of being public? Because there definitely are both.
It really was helpful during that acquisition period, to be a public company, because you have a currency, which is your shares, that allows you to acquire. because all of the numbers are transparent. You have very clear thresholds to in terms of governance and all that you need to have. It means that you also have access to the debt markets in a different way than you would have if you're a private company. So there's a lot of advantages when you're kind of that growth and macro growth situation to being public. And I definitely think that it was a big competitive advantage for us to be public when we were public during those growth years. And so that's kind of really the good side of it. The harder side of it is then you need to have that infrastructure to maintain that sort of governance at all levels, which when you're in a situation where you are now having to really focus 100% on operational execution, which can, if you're not careful, slow you down a little bit. So that's one of the reasons we've actually broke down the business into 3 business areas: North America, Europe, and MENA and APAC, where for each one of those, we have someone heading those business areas, so that we're in a situation we can be more nimble and more reactive and do things a lot faster. So finding ways in the organization to basically just counter that to be just a lot quicker and a lot more efficient, so that the people that are leading these business units, this business areas, they don't really have to deal as much as I have with being a public company, board meetings, speaking with analysts, all this sort of stuff. They're just really concentrating on executing and getting things done. So that's how we've circumvented that. The other way we circumvented that, which we would have done, to be honest, even if we weren't public, is to focus. This is a market now where there's really network effects towards size, and the strategy that we had of having a very diversified portfolio served us really well at the beginning, still serves us today. But it does mean that then you're kind of what was the right word? It's hard to put your best talent on your best products. So by saying that now we're going to focus on our 10 key game franchises, which have a certain size, and we're going to put our best talent on it. We're really going to, make the live operations absolutely excellent there. That allows you to deliver much better. So that's another thing that we're doing. And that's difficult to do because that does mean that you're going to stop concentrating on some other products. So they're going to drop. So short term, if you're a public company, you're probably doing you're getting negative organic growth and all sorts of stuff and all that, and protecting your cash flows, but you're getting negative organic growth. But you're doing that so that over the long term, you can have much more sustainable, positive growth across the group. That's obviously much easier to do when you're a private company than when you're a public company.
So that's really interesting. And I think what you're highlighting is, yes, you have access to capital in a way that you just don't in the private markets. You can be more acquisitive. As you said, you've got a currency that's actually valued, every single day by the market. Where if when you're a private company, that is not the case, right? You are still an illiquid asset. And to be acquisitive is often a lot more laborious, slower, and expensive. And so that is one of the pros. And so to be public, you're already in that position always to sort of be acquisitive if something presents itself. But from what you said earlier in the conversation, it seems like that has been less of the focus, and the focus has been more on double down on what is working internally for now, and potentially come fight another day on acquisitions when the market is a little bit more amenable.
Yeah, that's great. But it's not just the market. The market is a bit more amenable. And to be honest, and we've gotten our act together in certain things because in the last few years and during COVID, we did make a few acquisitions, and we haven't been shy about mentioning that in our quarterly reports. We made some acquisitions that haven't gone the right way. During the COVID times, there were very high multiples. Everyone got very excited. There was a lot of kind of acquisitions where some acquisitions were made where because of COVID, we couldn't even meet the people face to face. I mean, that's completely crazy when you think about it, in terms of, how can you make sure there's the right culture fit? How can you make sure you're getting the right things and all sorts of stuff and all that? So we have to clean that up, and we've been cleaning that up in a big way. And so, yes, the market needs to become more amenable, but the market is growing now. If you look at the games market, yes, it was declining after COVID, and Sensor Tower and everyone else was underestimating by how much it was declining. But now it is growing again, the mobile game free-to-play game market. The thing is, 95% of game makers are not growing because there's really a market of winners and losers now. And you've got just a few game makers that are capturing all of that growth. So if you're not 100% on your game, even if the market is growing, you're not going to grow.
And so kind of from that point, for you as the general with all your studios, the focus is find what is working within the portfolio, double, triple, quadruple down on that, stop spreading ourselves too thin, let that vortex kind of, people are going to choose to play less games. They're going to play just a few games, be more loyal to those games and monetize even better in those games. That's the strategy going forward versus historically speaking, games industry is growing so fast. There's games coming out every single second of the day, tens and tens of thousands of new games every year. I've seen reports even hundreds of thousands if you start combining them. Like, don't focus on the mass approach. Focus on, let's be very concentrated on a few good core positions. And that's kind of been the re-effort and refocus of Stillfront over the last couple years.
Especially because performance marketing has become a lot more difficult, post IDFA and all that. And you want to have ideally those games that have those organic effects, where you can have some sort of virality and all that. And you don't need to be Fortnite to have that. You can be a smaller game with these games called Supremacy. It's our Supremacy franchise, where the game called Conflict of Nations, with our game called Supremacy 1914. That's a small niche that we call grand strategy games. It's like even more niche than 4X, but very, very successful for us. And there, a big game doesn't need to be several $100 million game. It can be a $50 million, $40 million game. We know that those games are super sustainable and we can grow them. And we know that, yes, we need the performance marketing, but we know that once we've got people who start playing the games and fall in love with those games, there is an inherent organic virality to those games. So we focus on those. But today, if you have a very small match 3 game that's making, I don't know, $5 or $10 million, good luck competing, because Dream Games and Candy Crush or King and all that, they're going to crush you.
When you think about, growth, right? And this has been obviously an active topic for years now within games. Like, obviously post IDFA, everything just got harder for games, like entirely. It just did. And, a lot of discussion around organic growth, especially in mobile, is pretty much non-existent, right? And this is something I think, you highlighted in your 2024 report. It's very hard. And so you're having to compensate for organic growth seems to continue to decline. But then you have to compensate with performant growth. And obviously that concentrates around a few linchpins probably in the games industry. What do you think needs to change to since we're in this new performant market, how are you all being creative where, we're not beholden to just a few of the ad networks, right? Which most games companies are today for traffic. How do you think about being creative for new sources of users? Because I think this is a discussion I'm seeing more and more from more studio heads is we just have to, because otherwise the dollars don't shake out for, as you said, the mid to, lower successful players. It shakes out only okay if you are Dream Games or only if you are, as you said, King, right? So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so that's another reason why we're refocusing on the larger games and the larger franchises, which are the ones where you can have a product marketing person. And so until now, most of our games, honestly, we were only doing performance marketing. That's all we were doing. And now we've basically started doing product marketing and having people looking at things like, can we do an IP tie-in here? Or what can we do in our product pipeline? Yeah, that's all very good to focus on engagement and monetization. But should we have another product pipeline in terms of live operations that addresses, maintaining or even growing the DAU? How can we do that? What sort of products should we be thinking about for that? So that's how we're looking into it, because the formula that everybody's doing, which is, keep increasing your ARPDAU, that works for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But at some point, people are going to stop paying more and it's not going to work anymore. So obviously we're playing that game as well, but that game has its limits.
And obviously today, right, the way it works with, if, you have a player churn from one of your studios out into the market, then you sometimes have to pay the ad network again to reacquire that user again directly. Or if, you're thinking about trying to move a user who might be done with your game, maybe they've been in your game for 2 years and they're like, that was great, I'm done, I want to do something new. The cross promotion side of this, the way today it works is you're still paying the network to reacquire that user. How are you thinking about trying to cross-pollinate your user bases to obviously lower your acquisition costs? Is that something that's pretty topical for you at the group level?
Yeah, so it's something that we've been looking at and thinking about. And we had this big project of the Stillfront ecosystem and Stillfront ID before I step up. And what I've done actually is I've resized that project. I don't believe in cross-promotion across the whole portfolio. That, I don't think a match 3 player, you're going to cross-promote to a strategy game. It's not going to happen. I think you're going to even struggle to cross that player from the match 3 player to a farm management game. I think that's going to be hard. And we've tested that, and we've got the data that shows that it doesn't work that well. On the other hand, within my big game franchises, so we have the Supremacy franchise, where it's this grand strategy game, which is a specific type of experience of gameplay that we know people like. Well, if you're playing our 1914 First World War game, and we're seeing that you're starting to potentially churn, or why don't you try in our Conflict of Nations World War III game? Or if we're going to launch, we haven't announced it yet, but we're saying we're going to launch with a big IP later this year, a Supremacy game. We haven't said what IP that is. Then that's also a great thing, because I'm like, okay, that IP is going to open up the funnel a little bit. I'm going to get lots of players playing that game. And then potentially once, if I see they start getting a little tired of that game, but they enjoy the experience, the unique experience that we're giving them, maybe they want to try the World War game. And there within that, we've put all the infrastructure we're putting all the infrastructure for cross promotion in a smart way.
That's really interesting. You also hit a point that I've been thinking a lot about, which is the world of IP. And does the world have room for new IP? And this is something that I've discussed with a lot of people across media, generally, not just in games, is there's this sort of reattachment people have to just continuously go back to the wells of IPs that matter to them, whether that is Spider-Man, the Marvel, Lord of the Rings, which is my IP that I have to shout out because I love Lord of the Rings. They're just continuously going back to the well of these IPs, and with this kind of flood of, let's call it experiences, which a game is an experience, people continuously seem to want to go back to IPs that they know and love and trust. And you're hitting on this where you're saying, we're launching with a big IP later this year. I would imagine it's a pre-established IP that is something that has been in the market for a while. Is that a focus for you all? How do you I'm not going to use the word hijack IPs, but how do you partner with an IP to deliver a really good experience around it that has a pre-established audience? Is that another way to kind of, let's call it, lower your performance marketing costs because you're attaching yourself to something that's known and trusted? So
the people that I admire a lot in doing this, and I think have been able to do it very, very well, are and there's a good chat where I think it's in the Deconstructive Fund where Javier speaks about how they approach IPs at Scopely. Which I think is really the correct way of doing it. Is when you look at a well-loved IP, you need to understand, what is the universe, what is the kind of the thing that would really appeal to that fandom? What is the thing that people would really like? If you're a Trekkie, I don't think a classical 4X strategy game is going to work for you. So when they did this, the game, the Star Trek Scopely game, it's all about exploration in the beginning. It's actually a 4X game in the back, but it's all about going to, exploring the universe, all this sort of stuff and all that. If you look at what they did with Monopoly Go, you've got the board, you've got the dice, you've got the whole thing, but they've managed to almost augmented IP and still give you the feeling that you love with that IP, but make a game that's augmented. And I think that's a really smart approach to try and understand what is the aspiration that someone that loves an IP wants to experiment and live. So that's how we want to approach the confirm IPs. But I don't think that we're in a situation where this can only work with IPs that are pre-existent that people love. I still think that ultimate aspiration of a game maker is to create an IP. Games have an incredible reach. If you think of Angry Birds, massive IP, was all created by games. It's massive. It's known all over the world. If you think of what's that zombie show on HBO that's based in the game with Pedro Pascal?
Last of Us.
Yeah, The Last of Us. That's a game IP. It became massive. So I actually think there's a real opportunity to create. I mean, games are entertainment at the end of the day, and the reach the games have is immense. So I still think that we are in a field where we can create IPs to then go into other areas and all that. So it's really exciting from both sides. And over time, yes, I want to work with beloved, amazing legacy kind of IPs as we're doing now. But also I would like us to be able to create the IPs that 20 years, 30 years down the line, people will still love. And if you look at Albion Online, there's actually which is our MMO. There's a very successful book about Albion Online. There's actually a pop band that sings an Albion Online song in Germany that did quite well. It's really the beginning, but what was Dungeons & Dragons when it started? The beginning was it 40, 50 years to get a massive blockbuster movie based on Dungeons & Dragons? It takes time.
Yeah. And I think where I'm very bullish with you on games creating IP is that just wherever people spend their time is where, obviously they're voting with their time what they care about. Right. And so the question then is are people going to continue to spend more time in, let's call it, new IPs that are being formed and generated and created by games companies? Or are they going to spend more time in, let's call it, the Monopoly Goes, right? Where obviously they're leveraging an IP, Scopely's leveraging IP that is well-known, tried and true and tested. And I've seen more and more games companies choose to try to, grab a Monopoly or Lord of the Rings or, Spider-Man, like IP to try to, I think, it's in a lot of relation to trying to lower your CAC, right? Because you've already got the benefit of the doubt kind of walking into that media. You're like, oh, it's Spider-Man. It can't be that bad. Oh, it's something I know and trust versus total skepticism.
It helps you put the foot in the door, right? The IP that every man, it can't be that bad. But now people have such short attention spans, too many options. Take the next game, TV shows on Netflix, on HBO, and all that. It's at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to the quality of the experience and how the experience is personalized to your tastes, to what you really enjoy and like. So right now, I'm just competing with other game makers. I don't think my main competitors are necessarily Supercell or King. My competitors are the latest Game of Thrones series on, or White Lotus or TikTok. At the end of the day, I'm a big believer in the desirability of the human being for experiences that are fulfilling and enriching and just more interesting. And that's why I am, regardless of all the options you have out there, I'm super bullish what games can deliver.
I like the optimism. I share a lot of it with you, Alexis. Well, hey, I looked at the time and I've gotten more than I bargained for. And so, Alexis, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a great conversation. Really appreciate you jumping on with us and talking through the future of Stillfront games, your vision for the group. And I'm very bullish on the future of games and also the future of Stillfront as long as you're on the helm. So excited for what's to come.
Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate it. And really loving what you guys are doing at Convoy. You know I'm a big fan.